Alvaro Echeverria never imagined that silence could be the most brutal form of betrayal. The night had fallen on Madrid like a curtain of dark velvet, and from the windows of floor 42, the city shone like a board of illuminated chess. Alvaro observed that panorama with the same controlled satisfaction with which he reviewed the quarterly balances of his companies. Everything was where it should be. Everything worked according to the plan. Behind him, in the warm shade of the living room, Clara moved in silence. The almost imperceptible sound of her bare steps on the Italian marble was so familiar that Alvaro no longer even recorded it. She had always been like this, discreet, elegant, perfect in her role as the wife of an important man. Alvaro loosened the knot of his Hermes tie, without taking his eyes off the urban horizon. He had signed 3 contracts that week. He had expanded his real estate empire to the south of Spain. He had managed to get German investors to accept his terms without concessions. Power, he thought, was not just having money. It was the ability to move pieces on the board without anyone questioning your hand. Clara, with that ivory silk dress that fell on her body like water, passed by him on the way to the kitchen. She said nothing. She did not look at him. She simply existed in the same space as him for 3 seconds before disappearing behind the corner. Alvaro frowned for a moment. Something in that movement seemed strange to him, although he could not identify what. He shook his head. He was tired. It had been an intense week. He drank a 30-year-old Scottish whiskey, feeling the weight of the glass in his hand. A solid, real, controllable object. He drank a long sip and let the amber liquid burn his throat with that comforting familiarity. The phone vibrated in his pocket. Another message from his assistant. Another minor problem that required his approval. He answered with 3 precise words and kept the device. Efficiency. That was what separated successful men from the mediocre. Clara reappeared with a glass of white wine in her hand. She sat on the Italian leather sofa. She crossed her legs with that natural grace that she had always had. And she opened a book. The light from the foot lamp bathed her profile in golden tones. Her dark hair fell in soft waves on her bare shoulders. She was, objectively, a beautiful woman. Alvaro knew it. He had known it from the first day. He approached her and sat next to her. Clara did not look up from the book. Alvaro asked her about her day. She answered with short, polite phrases. She had gone to the gym. She had had lunch with a friend. She had bought flowers for the receiver. Everything normal, everything in order. Alvaro felt satisfied. He liked that Clara kept her routines. He liked the stability that she represented. Other men in his circle complained of demanding wives, of emotional dramas, of constant reproaches for their absences. Alvaro did not have that problem. Clara never complained. She never made scenes. She never demanded anything from him. She caressed his arm while he checked his phone mail with the other hand. Clara did not react. She went through a page of his book with slow and deliberate movements. Alvaro noticed that he did not remember the last time they had had a real conversation, of those that lasted more than 5 minutes, of those where they looked each other in the eyes and talked about things that mattered. But he immediately discarded the thought. They did not need that. Their relationship worked at a different level, more mature, more civilized. He got up to serve another whiskey. From the open kitchen, he observed Clara. She was still motionless on the sofa, with that book that looked more like a shield than a reading. Something in the curve of her shoulders, in the way she held the glass of wine without drinking, generated a discomfort that he could not name. He returned to the living room and asked her to have dinner outside on Friday. Clara looked up for the first time in half an hour. Her dark eyes studied him with an expression that Alvaro could not decipher. There was something in that look, something that was not exactly coldness, but it was not warmth either. Clara accepted with a small and perfectly polite smile. She told him that she liked him, that she would reserve wherever she wanted, that she would be ready at the time he said. Alvaro felt an immediate satisfaction. There she was, the understanding wife. the woman who never put obstacles. He returned to settle on the sofa, this time closer to her. He passed an arm through her shoulders. Clara did not move away, but she did not come close either. He stayed exactly where he was, allowing contact without reciprocating it. She asked him what he was reading. Clara closed the book and showed him the cover. A French novel that Alvaro had never heard of. She asked him what it was about. She replied with 3 generic phrases that said absolutely nothing. Alvaro insisted, genuinely curious for the first time in months. He wanted to know if he liked it. Clara looked at him again with that indescribable expression and said yes, that he liked it a lot, that it was about a woman who learned to live alone after years of living for others. Something in those words touched a nerve that Alvaro did not know he had. He frowned. He asked her why she read such depressing things. Clara shrugged elegantly. She told him that it did not seem depressing to her, that it seemed honest to her. Alvaro let out a short laugh. He told her that she would never have to worry about living alone, that he would always be there, that she would always have everything she needed. Clara looked at him for a second longer than usual. Something passed through his eyes, something that could have been sadness or perhaps compassion. Then he smiled again, with that perfect and empty smile that Alvaro knew so well, and he thanked her for being so considerate. He got up from the sofa with fluid movements, and he told her that he was going to sleep, that it had been a long day. Alvaro said yes. He kissed her on the cheek. Clara accepted the gesture with the same neutrality with which she accepted everything else. She saw her moving away through the marble corridor to the main bedroom. Her steps were not making noise. It was as if she were floating, as if it were no longer completely real. Alvaro was left alone in the living room, with his whiskey and his panoramic view of the illuminated city. He told himself that everything was fine, that his marriage was solid, that Clara was happy, that silence was synonymous with peace. But something in the air had changed, something so subtle that he could barely feel it, like when a door closes in another room, and one only perceives the change of pressure, not the sound. He drank the rest of his whiskey in one gulp. He said he was imagining things. That fatigue was making him paranoid. In the bedroom, on the other side of the apartment, Clara took off her silk dress with mechanical movements. She looked in the mirror for a long time. She saw a woman she knew but no longer fully recognized. A woman who had learned to disappear without leaving, to betray without lying, to be absent while still present. She went to bed and turned off the light. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she did not wait for Alvaro to come in. Alvaro in the living room kept looking at the lights of Madrid. He was still convinced that he had control. He still did not see the truth that was already floating in the air, like an invisible poison. His wife had betrayed him in the most cruel way possible. She had erased him from his emotional life without him even realizing it, and when he finally found out, it would be too late to recover what he never knew he was losing. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning, so small that Alvaro almost ignored it. He was reviewing contracts in his studio when he heard Clara's laugh from the terrace. It was not an educated or contained laugh. It was genuine, spontaneous, full of life, the kind of laugh that made people turn to look. Alvaro left the documents and walked to the window. Clara was on the phone, leaning against the glass railing, with the wind moving her hair. She smiled in a way that he did not remember having seen in years. Her eyes were shining. Her posture was relaxed, open, completely different from the subtle tension that she always seemed to carry inside the house. When she finished the call and entered the apartment, Alvaro asked her who she was talking to. Clara replied without hesitation that she was with Sofia, her university friend. Alvaro agreed. He told her that she seemed happy. Clara looked at him with that neutral expression that ultimately seemed to be her permanent state, and told him that it had been a pleasant conversation. Alvaro waited for more details, but Clara simply took his bag and informed him that she would go shopping. He gave her a quick kiss on the cheek and left, leaving behind a trail of French perfume and unanswered questions. That afternoon, during a meeting with his lawyers, Alvaro found himself thinking about that laugh, how it sounded different, how Clara seemed more alive talking to a friend than in any conversation they had had in recent months. He shook his head. He focused on the numbers in front of him. The numbers always made sense. The numbers did not generate this strange discomfort that he could not name. Friday arrived faster than expected. Alvaro had reserved a table in the most exclusive restaurant in Madrid, that place where ministers dined with businessmen and where a single bottle of wine cost more than the monthly salary of the majority. He arrived home early to change, waiting to find Clara ready, or at least getting ready. He found her sitting in the dresser, already completely dressed, looking at her phone with absolute concentration. She was wearing a black dress with an elegant neckline that embraced her figure impeccably. Her makeup was perfect. Her hair fell in soft waves. It was dazzling. But when Alvaro entered, Clara did not raise her eyes. Her fingers moved on the screen quickly, typing something that seemed urgent. She smiled slightly while writing. Alvaro scribbled. Clara finally looked at him as if she had just realized his presence. She kept the phone in her handbag with a fluid movement and stood up. She asked him if he was ready. His voice was kind, but distant, like that of a hotel employee asking if he needed anything else. During the journey to the restaurant, Alvaro tried to talk to her. He asked her about her week. Clara answered in general terms. She mentioned that she had been thinking about expanding her investment in the technology sector. Clara said she thought it was a good idea. She told him about a new project in Barcelona. Clara agreed at the right time. It was like talking to an educated and beautiful version of a virtual assistant. All the answers were correct. There was no real emotion. The restaurant was in the middle of the night, with candles on each table and a pianist playing soft jazz in a corner. The maître received them with exaggerated reverence and guided them to the best table, next to the windows, with a view of the great illuminated street. Alvaro ordered champagne without consulting. The waiter brought a bottle that cost 3,000 euros and opened it with ceremony. He served the glasses. Clara drank hers and drank a small sip, looking through the window at the city lights. Alvaro picked up his glass and tried to make a toast. For them, for their marriage, for the years together. Clara choked her glass against his with a mechanical gesture and drank again without saying anything. The conversation during dinner was painfully courteous. Alvaro talked about business because it was the only thing that seemed to fill the silence. Clara listened, asked smart questions that showed she was paying attention, but her eyes were still empty, as if the part of her that used to be present had gone somewhere else and had only left this beautiful and functional version of herself. In the middle of the second dish, Clara's phone vibrated inside her pocket. She ignored it the first time, the second time, but the third time she apologized and took it out. She looked at the screen. A smile, almost imperceptible, crossed her lips. She typed a quick answer and put it back. Alvaro asked her if everything was okay. Clara assured him that yes, that it was only Sofia asking something unimportant. Alvaro agreed. But something in the way in which Clara had smiled when she saw that message caused a discomfort she could not explain. After dinner, they walked down the main street. Alvaro tried to shake her hand. Clara allowed it, but her hand was cold and passive between his. There was no warmth. There was no connection. It was just a permitted gesture, not desired. He proposed to her to go for a drink at a nearby bar. Clara told him that she preferred to go home, that she was tired. Alvaro insisted. He wanted to prolong the night. He wanted to find some way to break this distance that he felt growing between them like an invisible fog. Clara accepted with polite resignation. They entered an elegant jazz bar, where the couples crouched on small sofas, and the music created a forced intimacy. Alvaro ordered whiskey. Clara asked for water with gas. Alvaro asked her directly if something was wrong. Clara looked at him with genuine surprise. She asked him why he would think that. Alvaro did not know what to answer, because everything seemed to be fine on the surface, because Clara did not complain, because there were no fights, because there were no dramas. But something was wrong. Alvaro felt it in his bones. It was like living with a ghost, with someone who fulfilled all the requirements of being his wife, but who was no longer really there. Clara put a hand on his. She told him that everything was perfect, that he was worrying too much, that maybe work was stressing him. His voice was sweet, and his expression was understanding. But Alvaro felt as if he was talking to an incredibly talented actress, representing the role of a loving wife. They returned to the apartment around midnight. Clara took off her shoes in the receiver and walked barefoot towards the bedroom. Alvaro followed her with an urgent need to break this invisible barrier, to find the woman he had met, to recover something he did not know he had lost. He tried to kiss her. Clara accepted the kiss with the same neutrality with which she accepted everything, without resistance, but without desire. Alvaro felt the difference as a physical blow. There had been a time when Clara kissed him back, where his hands were looking for him, where there was passion and urgency. Now there was only tolerance. He moved away from her, confused and slightly wounded. Clara looked at him with an expression that could have been compassion. She told him that she was very tired, that it had been a long night. Alvaro felt, feeling rejected, although technically she had not rejected him. Clara got into the bathroom. Alvaro heard the shower water running. He sat on the edge of the bed with his tie loose and his shirt wrinkled, trying to understand what the hell was going on. When Clara left the bathroom, wrapped in a silk robe, her phone vibrated on the nightstand. Alvaro saw it light up. Clara walked towards him quickly and took it before Alvaro could see who had written. She read the message. She smiled. That small and private smile Alvaro had seen on the terrace, the smile that never dedicated to him. She typed an answer. She kept the phone. She got into bed and turned her back to Alvaro. She wished him good night with a soft voice and closed her eyes. Alvaro sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the curve of his back under the silk sheet. He thought about asking who was writing so late. He thought about asking for answers. He thought about confronting her, but something stopped him. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the certainty that if he asked, he would get answers he did not want to hear. He got up in silence. He left the bedroom. He went to the studio and drank whiskey from the bottle he kept in the furniture of Caoba. He drank in the dark, looking at the lights of Madrid through the windows from floor to ceiling. For the first time in his adult life, Alvaro Echeverria felt that he was losing control. And the worst thing was that he did not know exactly what he was losing or when he had started to lose it. In the bedroom, Clara lay awake in the dark, with the phone shining under the sheets. She reread messages. She smiled in the darkness. She existed in a world that Alvaro did not know and to which he had never been invited. The betrayal was already complete. He just needed to realize it. And before we continue, beautiful, let me ask you a question. Where are you listening to me at this moment? Are you at home preparing dinner? Maybe in the car on your way to work? Or maybe lying in your bed thinking about this story that is just beginning? I would love to know. Leave me a comment below telling me where you are and what you think of Alvaro and Clara so far. Do you think he will realize in time? Or is it too late? And if this story is catching you as much as I hope, give me a like. It helps me a lot to keep bringing you stories that make you feel, think, and maybe see your own relations from another angle. I want you to know something important. I read every comment, each one, and I answer personally, because I care to know what you think, what you feel, what resonates with you about these stories. Now let's go back to Alvaro, who is about to discover that sometimes the worst betrayal is the one that happens in silence. Alvaro had never spied on his wife, until now. It was Wednesday morning, and Clara had left early mentioning something about a date at the spa, and then having lunch with friends. Alvaro had told her that he had meetings all day, but had canceled the first one. He stayed in the apartment, alone, surrounded by the silence that used to seem like peace, but that now felt like evidence of something broken. He walked through the shared spaces like a stranger in his own house. Clara's dresser was impeccable, organized with military precision, expensive clothes hanged by colors, shoes aligned like soldiers, bags in their original boxes, everything perfect, everything controlled. But when he opened the drawer where she kept her personal things, he found something that stopped him. A leather notebook in burgundy color, small, elegant, hidden under silk handkerchiefs. Alvaro knew he shouldn't open it. He knew it was a violation of privacy, but the need to understand what the hell was going on was stronger than his sense of what was right. He opened the notebook with trembling hands. It wasn't a diary in the traditional sense. There were no long confessions or detailed descriptions. They were just loose sentences, fragmented thoughts, dates accompanied by brief observations. March 15th, Alvaro arrived at 11 p.m. He didn't ask about my day. He talked about contracts for 20 minutes. He fell asleep. March 22nd, birthday dinner. He checked his phone 4 times during the dessert. He doesn't remember what he was wearing. April 5th, he asked me if I was happy. I said yes. He believed me because he wanted to believe me. Alvaro felt as if he had been stabbed in the stomach. He kept reading, unable to stop, although each line was like a knife. April 18th. Today I realized that I could leave and he would take weeks to notice it for real. Not because he's cruel, but because he doesn't see me anymore. April 25th. Sophia asked me when was the last time Alvaro and I talked about something real. I didn't know what to say. May 2nd. I stopped waiting for him to change. He's liberating. He's devastating, too. The pages continued. Months of cold and precise observations. Months of a woman documenting her own emotional disappearance. Alvaro read until he got to the last entry, dated 3 days ago. May 8th. He asked me if something was wrong. I said no. It was the most honest lie I've ever told. Because it's not wrong anymore. Simply, nothing is wrong anymore. And that, paradoxically, is fine. Alvaro closed the notebook with trembling hands. He returned it exactly where he had found it. He left the dressing room feeling that the floor was moving under his feet. He drank whiskey, although it was barely past 10 in the morning. He drank the amber liquid of a drink. Then he drank another one. All this time he had believed that his marriage was solid, because there were no fights, because Clara didn't complain, because she never made scenes or demanded attention. He had confused surrender with peace. He had confused the absence of conflict with the presence of love. Clara's phone was on the dining table. He had forgotten it when he left. Alvaro looked at it for 5 full minutes before taking it. He knew the password, his birthday. How ironic. He opened the messages. He wasn't looking for evidence of infidelity. He was looking for evidence of life. That Clara was still a real person with real emotions, and not this educated ghost who lived in his apartment. The messages with Sophia were extensive. Long conversations about books, art exhibitions, movies. Clara wrote with enthusiasm, with humor, with strong opinions. It was like reading the messages of a completely different person. Then there were the messages with someone named Mateo. Alvaro didn't know any Mateo. The messages were frequent, daily, full of references to previous conversations that clearly also happened by phone or in person. Alvaro read with an accelerated heart, but he didn't find anything explicitly romantic. There were no declarations of love. There were no secret meeting plans. It was worse than that. It was intimacy. It was a real connection. It was the kind of conversations that Alvaro used to have with Clara years ago, and that now only existed between her and this stranger. Mateo asked him how he felt. Clara answered honestly. She told him about books she read, about thoughts she had, about fears and hopes. Mateo listened. He answered deeply. He asked him questions that showed he paid attention. A message from 2 days ago said, "Sometimes I wonder if it is possible to miss someone who is physically present but emotionally absent." Mateo had answered, "It is not possible. It is inevitable." Alvaro left the phone as if it were burning. He sat on the Italian leather sofa where he had spent so many nights with Clara in silence, believing it was company, when in reality it was shared loneliness. The hours passed like minutes. When he heard the key on the lock, it was already midday. Clara came in with shopping bags and that serene expression that had been her face by default. She saw him sitting on the sofa with a glass of whiskey in her hand and stopped. Something in his expression must have alerted her because he asked if she was okay. Alvaro said yes. He asked her how her day had been. Clara replied that very well, that the spa had been relaxing, that she had had lunch with Sofia in that new restaurant in the neighborhood of Salamanca. Alvaro agreed. He asked her if she had forgotten something that morning. Clara looked around and saw her phone on the table. She walked towards him normally and took it. She checked the screen. If she noticed that she had been moved, she did not show it. Alvaro wanted to shout at her. He wanted to confront her. He wanted to demand answers, but something stopped him. Maybe it was cowardice. Maybe it was the certainty that if he opened that Pandora's box, he could not close it again. Clara went to change clothes. Alvaro stayed on the sofa looking at the shopping bags that she had left on the floor. One of them was open. Inside there was a dress. Blue, midnight blue, elegant, sophisticated. Nothing like what Clara normally bought. He approached and examined it. The label was still on. It was from an exclusive boutique, the kind of place where clothes cost thousands of euros and where each piece was unique. The dress was beautiful. Sensual, without being obvious. The kind of dress that a woman buys when she wants to feel desired. Clara had never bought something like this to wear with him. That night, they had dinner in silence. Clara prepared pasta with white truffle. Alvaro barely tasted a bite. She ate with the normal appetite of someone who has no guilt or worries. They talked about trivialities, the weather, the news, the noisy neighbors on the upper floor, everything so civilized, everything so polite, everything so dead. After dinner, Clara excused herself by saying she had a call. She locked herself in the closet. Alvaro heard his voice muffled through the door. He couldn't distinguish the words, but he could hear the tone. He was warm, alive, full of that energy that he never dedicated to him. When he left half an hour later, he had that small, private smile on his lips, the smile that Alvaro had learned to hate. He asked who he was talking to. Clara answered without hesitation that it was his mother. Alvaro knew he was lying. His mother-in-law called him only on Sundays in the morning. He was 80 years old, and his routine was unremovable. Clara looked him in the eyes while he lied, without blinking, without signs of nervousness. As if the lie were so natural as breathing, Alvaro felt something break inside him. It wasn't pain. It was something worse. It was the definitive understanding that he had lost his wife, and he didn't even know exactly when it had happened. He got up from the sofa. He told Clara he needed some air. She asked him if he wanted her to accompany him. Alvaro almost laughed at the irony. He said no, that he preferred to be alone. He left the apartment and walked the streets of Madrid without a fixed destination. The night city was buzzing with life. Couples holding hands, laughter coming out of bars, people living real lives with real emotions. Alvaro walked for hours. When he finally returned to the apartment around midnight, Clara was already asleep, or at least pretended to be asleep. He stood next to the bed, looking at her in the dark. She looked beautiful even asleep, but she was the beauty of a statue, perfect, cold, unreachable. Alvaro knew at that moment that he would have to confront her, that he could not continue living in this polite lie where both pretended that everything was fine. But not yet. He still needed to understand the full extent of what he had lost before facing the truth that he already knew was going to destroy him. The confrontation came one rainy night when Madrid was crying against the windows of floor 42. Alvaro had spent 3 days mentally preparing. 3 days watching Clara move around the apartment like a beautiful ghost. 3 days knowing that he had to speak, but postponing the moment because a part of him still wanted to believe that he was imagining things. But that night, when Clara returned from another of her mysterious outings, with her wet hair of rain and that private smile on her lips. Something in Alvaro seemed calmer than he expected. He told her that they needed to talk. Clara looked at him with that neutral expression that he knew so well. She asked him about what, as if there was nothing to talk about, as if everything was perfectly normal. Alvaro walked to the bar and drank whiskey. He did not offer it to Clara. He told her to stop pretending, to stop acting as if he were stupid, that he knew something was going on. Clara hung her coat with slow and deliberate movements. She walked to the sofa and sat down with that grace that never seemed to leave her. She looked him directly in the eyes and asked him what he thought was happening exactly. Alvaro felt the frustration burn in his chest. He told her about the secret smiles, about the constant messages, about how she seemed more alive talking to other people than with him, about how he had found the blue dress that he had clearly not bought to wear at home. Clara listened to him without interrupting. When he finished, she simply asked if there was anything else. Her calm was more devastating than any scream would have been. Alvaro drank his whiskey in one gulp. He asked her directly who Mateo was. He saw the flash of surprise in Clara's eyes. It was brief, quickly replaced by something that seemed like a disappointment. She asked him if he had checked his phone. Alvaro did not answer. He did not need to do so. Clara sighed, not with guilt, but with fatigue. She told him that Mateo was a friend, someone he met at an art exhibition 6 months ago, someone with whom he could talk about things that mattered, someone who asked him how he felt and was really waiting for an answer. Alvaro felt the blow as something physical. He asked her if she was sleeping with him. Clara looked at him with something that could have been compassion. She told him no, that she had never betrayed him that way, that Mateo was just a friend. Alvaro wanted to believe her, but he could not. She told him that emotional intimacy was worse than sex, that sharing thoughts and feelings with another man was the deepest betrayal. Clara did not deny anything. She simply told him that she was right, that she had betrayed him, but not the way he thought. She stood up and walked towards the window. The rain continued to fall on Madrid. The city lights shone blurry through the wet glass. Clara spoke without looking at him. She told him that the betrayal had begun long before Mateo. The day had begun when she stopped caring for him, the day when he became another piece of furniture in the apartment, beautiful, functional, but not really seen. Alvaro tried to interrupt, but Clara raised a hand. She told him to call her, to let her finish, that she had waited years to say this. She told him of all the times that she arrived late without warning, of the dinners where he checked the phone instead of looking at it, of the anniversaries where he bought expensive but impersonal gifts that showed that he did not know her at all, of the nights where they slept together, but separated by an abyss that no one mentioned. She told him that she had tried to speak, that she had tried to share her thoughts and feelings, but he was always busy. He always had a meeting. There was always something more important than her. Clara looked at him again. Her eyes were dry. There were no tears. Only a terrible clarity made Alvaro want to look away. She told him that the betrayal had not been towards him. It had been towards herself. She had betrayed her own needs. She had betrayed her own voice. She had become invisible to maintain peace, to be the perfect wife that he seemed to love. Alvaro felt that the ground was moving. He told her that this was not fair, that he had always treated her well, that he had given her everything, the best life, the best apartment, expensive clothes, luxurious trips, everything a woman could want. Clara looked at him with deep sadness. She told him that she had given him everything except what she really needed, her attention, her time, her real presence. She told him that Mateo wasn't her lover. He was just someone who saw her as a person, someone who remembered things that she mentioned, someone who asked her about her dreams and really listened to the answers. Alvaro felt something break inside him. He asked her why she had not complained, why she had not told him anything. Clara smiled without humor. She told him that she had done it, 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways, but he had not listened. He had not wanted to listen. She reminded him of the time when she asked him to spend a weekend together without work. He had accepted, and then canceled for a last-minute meeting. She reminded him of the time when she suggested going to couple therapy. He had said that they did not need her because they did not fight. She reminded him of all the conversations that she had tried to have, and that he had cut off with distractions or with the conviction that everything was fine. Alvaro could not deny any of those things. The memories were there. He had chosen to ignore them. He had chosen to believe that silence was peace, that the absence of complaints meant happiness. He let himself fall on the sofa. He asked her in a low voice if she still loved him. Clara took a long time to answer. When she did, her voice was soft but firm. She told him that she no longer knew, that perhaps some part of her still loved the man he had been when they met, but that the man in front of her was now a stranger who shared his last name, but not his life. Alvaro felt tears burn in his eyes for the first time in years. He asked her what she wanted. Clara walked to the sofa and sat next to him. He did not touch her. He kept that distance that had become so familiar. He told her that he did not know, that he had spent so much time being what he needed, that he had forgotten who she really was, that Mateo and Sofia and all those mysterious outings were not about finding something new. They were about recovering something that he had lost, his own identity. He told her that he did not want a divorce, at least not yet, but that he could not continue living in this educated farce where both pretended to be happy, that he needed space, he needed time, he needed him to really see her for the first time in years. Alvaro asked him what that meant. Clara stood up. He told her that he was going to stay in his mother's apartment for a while, that they needed this separation to understand if there was still something that was worth saving. Alvaro felt panic. He told her not to leave, that they could fix it, that he would change. Clara looked at him with infinite sadness. She told him that the words were easy, that she had heard promises before, that this time she needed to see actions. She walked to the bedroom. Alvaro followed her desperately. He saw her take a suitcase out of the closet and start packing. Efficient movements, practiced, as if he had planned this for months. He begged her to wait, to give her another chance. Clara stopped. She looked at him with those dark eyes that had been the first thing that attracted him to her years ago. She told him that this was his chance, that the time apart would give him the opportunity to decide if he really loved her or if he just wanted her idea. The perfect wife that did not cause problems. He finished packing in silence. Alvaro stood up next to the door feeling completely useless. He saw Clara close the suitcase. He saw how the wedding ring was changed by hand. He did not take it off. He just moved it. A small gesture that said it all. Clara walked to the door. She stopped in front of Alvaro. For a moment he thought that she would kiss him, that there would be some gesture of affection. But Clara only touched his arm briefly, a touch that felt like a goodbye. She told him to call her when he was ready to have real conversations. Not about business, not about logistics, about them, about feelings, about whether there were still them worth saving. Then he left. Alvaro heard his steps in the corridor, the sound of the elevator, the silence that followed. He was left alone in the luxury apartment that suddenly felt like a tomb. The lights of Madrid shone outside. The rain kept falling. And Alvaro Echeverria, the man who thought he had everything under control, collapsed on the sofa and cried for the first time since he was a child. He cried for everything he had lost, for everything he had never valued until he was gone, for the woman he had loved and who he had destroyed with his indifference, disguised as success. The first days after Clara left were the longest of Alvaro's life. The luxury apartment, which had always been his fortress, now felt like a prison. Each room was full of Clara's absence. Her perfume was still floating in the air. His books were still on the nightstand. The blue dress he had bought hung on the dresser as a reminder of everything he had not seen. Alvaro did not call for 3 weeks, not because he did not want to, but because he knew that Clara was right. The words were easy. He had promised to change before, in small ways. and he had never done it. This time, he needed to be different. He canceled meetings. For the first time in 15 years, he delegated responsibilities. He told his assistant not to accept commitments after 6 in the afternoon. His partners looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Maybe he had lost it. Or maybe he had finally found it. He began to go to therapy. A senior psychologist in the neighborhood of Chambéry was not impressed by his money or his achievements. The man asked him uncomfortable questions. He made him see patterns he had been repeating since his youth. He made him understand that he had mistaken providing with loving. He had believed that his value as a man was only in what he could give materially, not in what he could share emotionally. Alvaro read the Burdeos notebook that Clara had left behind. He read it completely this time, not just fragments. Each page was a mirror that reflected his failures, but it was also a map. It showed exactly where he had lost his way and how he could find it again. He called Sophia. He asked her to meet with him to have coffee. She reluctantly agreed. They sat on a terrace with a view of the retreat, and Alvaro asked him to tell him about Clara, about the Clara he did not know, the one who laughed freely, the one who had strong opinions, the one who was more than the silent shadow that had inhabited his apartment. Sophia studied him for a long time before speaking. She told him that Clara had been one of the most vibrant, intelligent, passionate, full of life, but that marriage had been slowly extinguishing her, not out of cruelty, but out of negligence, for years of not being seen. She told him about the times that Clara had cried on his shoulder, about how she had tried to justify Alvaro's absence, about how she had gradually stopped trying. She told him that Mateo was not a threat. He was just a friend who had reminded him that he still existed as a complete person. Alvaro absorbed every word as a deserved punishment. He thanked Sophia for his honesty. She told him that if he really wanted to recover Clara, he had to be willing to meet her again. Not the woman he had molded to fit into his life, but the real woman who had been hidden all this time. A month passed before Alvaro felt ready to call Clara. When he finally did, she answered the third doorbell. Her voice sounded cautious, but not hostile. Alvaro asked her if they could meet, not to talk about reconciliation, just to talk. Clara was silent for so long that Alvaro thought she had hung up. Then he said yes. They met in the Retiro Park one Saturday afternoon. Clara was sitting on a bench near the pond. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, without elaborate makeup, without the elegant armor she always wore at home. She looked younger, more real. Alvaro sat next to her, keeping a respectful distance. He did not try to touch her. He did not bombard her with apologies. He simply asked her how she was, and then he waited. He really waited for the answer. Clara looked at him with surprise. She told him about her days, about how she had painted again, something she had abandoned years ago because Alvaro had turned her study into an extra office, about how she had started volunteering in an animal shelter, about how she was rediscovering parts of herself that she had forgotten existed. Alvaro listened, asked questions, not about logistics or plans, but about how she felt, what made her happy, what she missed, what she expected for the future. They talked for 2 hours. When they said goodbye, Alvaro did not ask her to come back. He only asked if they could see each other again. Clara accepted. The meetings became weekly, walks through the park, coffees in quiet places, conversations that had no agenda beyond knowing each other. Alvaro told her things that he had never shared, about his missing father, about how he had grown up believing that being a successful man meant never showing weakness or emotional need, about how he had replicated that pattern without realizing it. Clara shared her own fears, about how she had lost her voice trying to be the perfect wife, about how she had confused adapting with disappearing, about her own responsibility in the collapse of marriage because she had stopped fighting for what she needed. One rainy afternoon, sitting in a small cafe in the neighborhood of Malasaña, Clara asked him directly what Alvaro wanted. He took her hand for the first time in months. He told her he wanted another chance, but not to return to what they had. That was broken and dead. He wanted to build something new, something real, where both were seen and valued. Clara did not respond immediately. She told him she was afraid, that the words were beautiful, but that she had heard promises before. Alvaro agreed. She told him she understood, that she did not expect him to trust words, that she only asked him for the opportunity to show him with actions that had changed. She told him about therapy, how she had restructured her work life, how she had learned that success without human connection was just an empty, disguised achievement. She showed him the Burdeos notebook. She told him that she had read it 100 times, that each page was a lesson that she had needed to learn. Clara's eyes were filled with tears for the first time. She asked him why he had had to lose her to finally see her. Alvaro felt the weight of that question. He told him that he did not have a good answer, that he had been blind, that he had confused the absence of conflict with the presence of love, that he lamented every day lost, every conversation not had, every moment where he had chosen the work on it. Clara cried in silence. Alvaro did not try to stop her or comfort her with commonplaces. He was only present. He only offered her his complete presence in the way he had never done before. When Clara could speak, he told her that she too had made mistakes, that she had stopped communicating clearly, that she had built resentment and silence instead of demanding what she needed, that both had contributed to this disaster. He told her that he wanted to believe her, that he wanted to try again, but that he needed time. He needed to see if this change was real or just a reaction to the fear of losing her. Alvaro accepted those terms without negotiating. He proposed to start again, not as husbands who were trying to save a marriage, but as two people who were meeting for the first time. Real dates, honest conversations, building trust from scratch. The following months were the most difficult and most revealing of Alvaro's life. He had to learn to be present without a schedule, to listen without trying to solve, to value the small moments more than the big gestures. He took Clara to art exhibitions, not because she especially liked modern art, but because she did. He learned to cook because he discovered that Clara liked the intimacy of preparing food together. He had uncomfortable conversations about feelings he didn't know how to name. He was wrong many times, but he kept trying. Clara also changed. She learned to express her needs directly, not to assume that Alvaro had to guess what she felt, to forgive honest mistakes while keeping clear limits about what he wouldn't tolerate. One night in December, almost 6 months after their separation, they were having dinner in Clara's apartment. They had cooked together, a simple dinner. Pasta with homemade tomato sauce, cheap wine, genuine laughs. Alvaro looked at her through the table lit by candles and saw a completely different woman he had met. Stronger, more complete, more herself. And he realized he loved her in ways he had never loved the silent version that had inhabited his life before. He told her he loved her. Clara smiled. He told her she loved him too, but that this love was different, more mature, more honest, built on who they really were, not on who they pretended to be. He asked her if she was ready to go home. Clara thought about it for a long time. Then she said yes, but under different conditions. Weekend partner therapy, nights dedicated only to them without exceptions, honest communication, even if it hurt. The promise that if they were to lose each other again, they would speak before silence destroyed them again. Alvaro accepted every condition, not as concessions, but as gifts, as opportunities to build the marriage they should have had from the beginning. When Clara finally returned to the apartment on 40C second floor, she did not return as the silent wife who had left. She returned as an equal, as a partner, as the woman who had always been, but who could finally be openly. Alvaro learned that real control did not come from managing every aspect of life. It came from the vulnerability of sharing it with someone who saw you completely. Clara's betrayal had never been about another man. It had been about regaining her own voice, and paradoxically, that betrayal had saved their marriage by destroying the farce that had been. The lights of Madrid shone out of the windows as always, but now Alvaro looked at them with Clara by his side, not in silence, but in conversation. Not as strangers sharing space, but as lovers learning to truly love each other. And for the first time in years, the luxury apartment did not feel empty. It felt like a home